to the Badlands Nation Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Titan. Today, we have our guest, Artifact. Welcome, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here. This is great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I've been getting my feet wet in podcasting, and I've been looking at people that I've been networking over the last year or two, anyways. And I knew your background, and I wanted to get your feedback. I've asked you and bounced ideas off you in the past, and you've given me some good guidance, and so I wanted to get you on here and see your perspectives on our topics today.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to the conversation and answering all these questions. Let's get to it.
Yeah, the your group that you're with, I just want to make sure that you do get your pitch in whenever we get to it. But starting off, I sent you some questions that I ask for everybody that comes on the show, just for our listeners. Questions that I like to know about who our guests are. Being, are you prior servicemen, or what's your real world occupation? What's your favorite gaming memory? What's your favorite adult beverage? And why did you choose your gamer handle? You can quick fire in succession on those, or however you want to tackle them.
Sure. I'll just start from the top of the list. I'm actually prior service. I was in the Army. I originally joined as a reservist back in 1992. Went full time after that. I was in psychological operations during my first 8 years in the Army. I got out in 2000. There was not a lot going on there. I, there was nothing real world that was really interesting me. I had met my wife. We got together. We were, getting married, getting ready to have kids, all that stuff. Then 9/11 happened, and I came back in the middle of the 2000s, and I was getting a little too old to be running around in the woods with a rifle anymore. So I opted to be a crew chief on a Black Hawk. I came in as a 15 Tango as a Black Hawk repairman, and I ended up being a crew chief on a Black Hawk, and did that for 7 years. So I have a lot of real world experience with both small unit tactics and special operations. Although, to be clear, I wasn't a ranger or special forces or anything like that. I just worked with those guys. And then I did a lot of work in aviation in the real world. So I have pretty good mix of experience.
Nice.
And let's see, favorite gaming memory. Honestly, it's going to sound a little silly because it's somewhat relevant to Star Citizen. Wing Commander. When I first bought a Sound Blaster card, it was the first game I'd ever had where people were talking at you. So I remember this clear as day. It was one of the coolest experiences that just blew me away. You had actors on the screen saying their lines, talking to each other, and it was one of the most immersive storytelling experiences I've ever had in my life. I absolutely loved that game, and it was the first time that I'd been immersed in that way. And it's hard for people who grew up who were even 10 years younger than me to understand because that's what all games were like then. Before then, it was just text stuff. So that one experience kind of changed how I look at gaming forever. I'll always remember that. And my favorite adult beverage, let's see. I love a good beer, like a good, just, I like microbrews. I like Budweiser. I like everything, but a good local, well-made, well-crafted beer is my favorite adult drink. And Artifact, well, I'm an old man. I'm in my mid 40s. I've been around the block a long time. So I'm an artifact of the past, and it just seemed to fit. And it was also it ended up being my call sign when I was in the Army at the end of my career. So
Oh wow. So there's that. I mean, that's kind of neat. Yeah. No, I've
yeah,
I've I've really enjoyed getting to ask some of these questions because we get so tied up into the people or character or the gameplay we want inside the verse that we're playing, but it's also neat to know who the real guy behind the mic is or the keyboard. So that's really
yeah,
neat.
that handle actually followed me from the real world, from the military to here. So it's just one of those things.
That's awesome. So yeah, regards to the topic of today's podcast for daily operations, I know you said you've got some desire, and in the past I've kind of asked you, hey, does this make sense, or am I off base on this, or what did they do in the real world and whatnot? So our daily ops, the for us, and again for Lowell's, there's some cohesion there. Is for Badlands Defense and Shipping Company, we basically are trying to figure out what a daily ops looks like or what a logistics for freelance trade for profit. If we have an individual contractor, if we're running big birds from one port to another, basically trying to figure out from turnkey of getting that cargo on the craft all of your decision makings from takeoff to landing of the next port, and then the selling, and then doing it all over again. We also want to kind of like get the idea of what it's going to be like from player interactions with dealing with cargo or NPC based cargo missions and stuff, just like in Eve. You know, hey, we have such a large size cargo, we need it to be moved to here, and you're doing it for an NPC for, you know, a mission that could be a chain quest, or it could end up being just a daily role of a mission. And then the other part of our service that we're wanting to provide is that we chose the holes that we did because I don't foresee one player asking another player to move goods or commodities, cargo, as much as I do them wanting to move their assets. So their spaceships, their ground vehicles, their motorcycles, whatever. Kind of the logistics behind having to move someone else's assets and how those kind of contracts will work, or the logistics behind them.
All right, that kind of feeds in. This is one of the reasons you and I have hit it off. We hit it off so quickly, and we've done so for so long. Is you and I are kind of the opposite sides of the same coin, right? Um, Legendary Operations and Logistics Systems, which is what LOL stands for, was an idea that me and a couple of friends put together for very similar reasons, right? Um, you can't just provide security services to people. There are way too many organizations out there that think they're just going to be able to go around and blow things up all the time, and don't understand that that's not what makes people fight. People fight over things. So there needs to be logistics feeding your military forces, and there needs to be a reason for people to be fighting to begin with in a game that's set up the way that Star Citizen is, much like Eve was, right? So the entire point of our organization is very similar to yours, which is why we've had these many conversations in the past. Is you need a you need a way to be able to move these goods, and the way that you move things is you have security around those goods, you have a place to go, you have a plan to move those goods, and you have all the necessary components to fix those ships that go around. You have a way to fuel those ships. You have a way to rearm and repair all of your combat ships. All that stuff feeds into everything that happens in the universe. Even if, like you're just moving around someone's cargo for them, if that's what you're doing.
Yeah,
And in order to do that, all those things need to be in place around you for you to be able to move those goods. There needs to be security. There needs to be a reason to do it. There needs to be all the little logistics and maintenance operations that have to happen in order to keep those ships in repair, because ships are going to break down, right? And if ships break down, that means you need spare parts. So unless you have all of those things figured out ahead of time, you're not going to be able to run have a well regulated organization that's able to even provide that service for paying customers.
try and keep the start stop of operations to a minimum is going to be key to, even as well, like you say, not even just for profit or for success, but to keep people interested in playing or wanting to be part of that kind of operation, right? Like, I'm going to sit here and I've got 3 hours to play every evening, and I'm going to spend an hour of it waiting because somebody didn't check the degradation of some components, and now we've got to wait to get those on the ship that's for our mission. That's the way I look at it. Is that as well as what somebody's time is worth to be able to actually get to play the game.
Well, this is why you need to find the right people for the right job, both in a game and in real life, right? People are suited to do different things. Not everyone likes to sit there and fly around in space shooting at people 24/7. There are plenty of people who like to go out there and be a space trucker, and there are plenty of people who like to move things around, and there are plenty of people who like to, get their hands dirty and fix the systems and get everything running at peak efficiency. The job of any management team, whether it's in a game or it's in real life, in this case, it's for an organization in a game, is to get the right people into the right jobs doing the right things. So if you get those people in place, so that the people who like doing repairs always have a list of things to fix, and the people who like moving things from A to B always have a list of things that needed to be moved from A to B, and that they're well compensated when they do that, and they get to be a part of a larger team, and they have a real purpose and a real place in the grand sense of an organization. If you're able to create those conditions for people, what happens is I think, in my opinion anyway, you end up with an organization that it kind of runs itself when everybody's doing things that they like doing in an organized fashion.
For sure, because then it turns into if you get to feed your passion it's you're gonna move with a purpose, right? You're gonna log on with a purpose. You're gonna be looking forward to doing the teamwork or doing whatever trade it is that you're contributing, and it's at your skill set. It's not of something that somebody's got to ask of you, and it's like, man, I that's not what I get on here for. If you can get somebody in their, like you said, in their wheelhouse of their passion, I think that it's better gameplay for everybody all around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just about knowing the people you work with. Listen, there are plenty of ways to run an organization. Some people like to have these massive 10,000 strong people where it's a bunch of cat herding, but generally speaking, they get things done just through sheer mass of personnel. I take the opposite tact. I want an organization that's no bigger than 50, maybe 70 people who are all well trained and all doing things that they like doing. And in that way, I can provide service to my in-game customers. But the real point is to have fun, right? This is a game.
For
So if
sure.
we're all doing things that we want to do and they feed into a greater purpose, which in this case is our organizational purposes, everyone wins. So yeah, logistics are important, but the point of them is to make sure that things are going where they need to go. And in order to make that happen, you need to have the right people making those things go from A to B.
Yeah, and with that too, some of the mundane stuff that I've tried to cut out, like we've been trying to build a networking, and we're not ready to release it, but essentially we're trying to build a tool that is to work with our joint companies or networking systems that we can share information or we can multiply each other's efforts. And we're trying to do that real fluidly. But like when it comes to the bots and stuff, like or systems in place that you can like ping off of, what kind of tools are y'all looking for, whether it be for communications or for tracking your assets or anything? So it's kind of a broad question that I provided to you, but like what kind of Discord bots do you plan to use whenever it comes to roles, whether they be temporary or whether it be to for other people to use that you network with? Like basically, what kind of tools are you looking forward to in your size company, as well with the people that you roll with for operations?
Well, we actually only use one Discord bot right now. We're using the Discal, which is it's a calendar bot, just to help schedule operations as they happen in game right now. Uh, we're still relatively small as an organization, so we don't have the need of a lot of different bots in order to do things. But what we have done is we've made heavy use of platforms like Google Docs and Google Sheets. We have an entire set of accounts and everything else that we run in the background with the directors of our organization, where we have everyone. We know what every person has for their ships that they've basically loaned to the organization, and where they are and in what condition they are in. So we have basically operational logs and maintenance logs and readiness rosters for weapons, for armor, for ships, and that's all done like in Google Sheets and in Google Docs.
Gotcha.
Um,
So once
we write
degradation and stuff comes online, or tracking how many hours or whatnot, you've implemented the foundation to be able to start tracking that information.
Yeah, so my background, I have a military background in aviation maintenance, so that is hugely helpful for this kind of thing because that's basically what aviation maintenance is keeping track of those things. And I also have a very long background in racing, which has similar requirements for keeping track of maintenance and getting and making sure things get fixed, and then logging all that stuff somewhere. So those two things I'm personally leveraging in order to have a system in Google Sheets in this case where I can keep track of repair states and degradation and maintenance schedules for all of our assets.
That's awesome. What so leading into the next question, being with all that being said, what kind of gameplay is your company looking to run on a daily op? Like, what does a daily op look like for your group?
Sure. So we have two basic flavors of operation. The name kind of gives away what we do. We legendary operations and logistics. So we do two things. We do security services for people who want to move things, and then in order to pay the bills, we also move things. Now those things might be cargo that we're earning for profit. They might be things that we're paid to move. Primarily, we're just interested in paying the bills for the military arm of the organization. So that's the secondary focus. The reason why we have that is A, we need the money, and B, as I implied earlier, in order to be effective in any sort of security role or to do any fighting, well, you need missiles, you need bullets, and you need things repaired after they get blown to little bits. So the daily op for what my company wants to do, for what our organization wants to do, is we want to be able to provide everything from a single fighter as an escort. We have actually have a contract we're doing with somebody who specializes in 890 jump tours right now, doing exactly that, where we're providing fighter escort for them. We have a ground combat side of the house, and we have a couple of people who are very good at FPS games who run that, so we can do security missions for people. And then we can do all the way up to, we have an Idris and a Javelin in the organization as well. So if you want to take over a sector of space, we can do that for you. We have a Pioneer, so if you need something built and you need it done in a very secure fashion, we can do that for you. The idea here is that we're a Swiss Army knife. Any mission that involves moving something or shooting something, so long as it isn't 1,000 people and you don't need an army, we're your guys. That's what we do.
Fair enough. So you've kind of taken the approach of is that as we get more mechanics of the gameplay available to us, is that your org is got in its toolbox stuff that it gets to be more or less involved with anything with your group size, but the mechanics of your group size. There's you from orbit to planet to whatever you're going to be able to provide ground services, escort services, interstellar services. You'll be able to offer infrastructure. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So what we've done is there's no way to provide that level of service on a huge scale without having so many people and so many divisions and so many things else that it'll be a massive organization like some of the very large organizations you had in Eve, right? So what I've opted to do is we're very choosy in who we bring into laws, and we're trying to create what amounts to an elite force, but it'll only be at most 100 people probably at the end of the day. So we can do everything. We just can't do it with 70 people at a time.
No,
So
I understood, and that's the same thing for us. Is that my guys are like, why do you put a number to it? Why don't you think that the group could grow to be bigger than that? And it's like part of me is like you said, I don't want to. I got to experience that for 10 years in Eve, and I'm a number. Press F1, you monkey, and I don't want that. So same with us. I've said at max we're going to be a 100-man roster, but you have to calculate what your online rate percentages is. And in Eve, the rule of thumb was a 20% show up rate. We live in the real world, and we're all trying to make ops and plans, and things get in the way. So even though you have a 100-man roster or a 70-man roster, or even in a smaller org, a 20-man roster, you need to plan for roughly about a 20% show up rate at any given time for prime time calculations and whatnot. So we the same way, Artifact. We looked at it and said, let's plan ops. Let's build our toolbox and let's plan ops around the size group of guys that we can expect to be online during prime time.
right, well, you have to respect the limitations of your organization. Every organization, no matter how big or small, no matter what resources you have, has limitations of some variety. So I'm just embracing our limitations that I've set out for ourselves
Sure
simply
thing.
because it's more fun that
I
way.
think
You know
so.
what I mean?
For sure. You know that you've got these guys, they're playing, they're getting to be part of the gameplay that they want. And it's a close knit group too, right? Like so everybody knows each other by name, everybody knows what everybody's doing. Not to say that you won't still be communicating it, but I think there's something to be said about small gang operations for sure. And small gang being relative, it's not a derogatory. We're very much so small gang. We're scrappy, if you will.
Well, sure. I'm not going to tell anyone how to play a video game. That's not my business. You play it how you like. The people that are ending up in my organization, and from what I've seen of your organization, it works kind of the same way. It's a big group of friends who are getting together to do something collectively, and no matter how serious you are about it, at the end of the day, it's still that you're still there to have fun, right?
For
Now,
sure.
my organization, especially the leadership, are very focused and very interested in creating an efficient and well-run group with a lot of features that make us very effective. But that's because the people that we've gotten together all are interested in winning, right? So th- choose your friends wisely is kind of the statement that leaps to mind, right?
For sure. And the kind of the last point turning on to with that about what people are looking for, or like what their goal is. What kind of gameplay I specified in the question, are you looking for, but as a group, but as well as yourself, like what is some gameplay that you're waiting to come online personally?
So personally, I'm really actually looking forward to when they get land claims and the ability to build bases into game, because at that point we'll be able to actually start staking out areas. You figure that mining will be more fleshed out, then some of the other systems will be more fleshed out, then people will actually be able to start claiming areas and be able to do things that matter to them. And once you have the ability to do things that matter to you personally, that's when you have a game that people will keep playing.
Yeah, so in with that, like, so the land claim systems, and it's sovereign, right? You got your space. What do you guys plan on doing from there? Like, assuming y'all are going to start doing maybe more ground based ops, are you going to start actually trying to establish your presence there, or y'all want to be kind of more of like in the background, like, yeah, this is our place, but we're going to start learning how to operate out of this area and not be noticed. You get what I'm asking?
Sure, sure. We're never going to be big enough to take over an area and put down borders and defend it like we're a nation state. That's never going to be our goal. So obviously there are a bunch of people in my organization. I don't get to just make things up. Um, we operate as a very consensual kind of organization. I might be the director of it, but trust me, I don't do anything on my own unless there's
No, I
consensus,
understand.
right?
I understand.
Um, the current thinking right now is that we'll probably operate from smaller bases. A few of them, we'll set them up as needed, and mostly keep our operations in one part of space without being super spread out. That means we'll probably have a couple of smaller areas to operate from, but it will never look like, you know, Renaissance Italy, where we're the king of all we survey or anything like
Right,
that.
right, right. Yeah, no. For us, we had a group that we contacted that we're pretty friendly with, and they bought a lot of land claims and they bought a lot of pioneers, and so it was like, okay, well, we know our ground guys are going to want something to do, so we wanted to make a I forget the name of it, but it's basically it's a CQB town, or like an establishment, basically a training facility, a tank range, and Marines, if you will, training ground. So we'd build this fake infrastructure and we'd use it for for fun, but training purposes, and as well as sometimes it leads to fun gameplay that you can create up in an event whenever you don't have to rely on what the verse provides you. If you eventually can build an infrastructure for training and whatnot for yourself, so that was kind of our goal. We're looking forward to the ground claims as well, so that way we can actually start uh, planning ops or doing some things differently.
Sure, and I'm looking forward to it for the same reason. Once they get land claims in place, the assumption here is given all the ground vehicles they're making and how they're making kind of an integrated combined arms approach to how combat's going to work on the game, that at least seems to be what their goal is. My assumption here is that you're going to be able to create defensive structures as well. So the idea here is I'm never going to be creating a massive military base. I'm more creating a FOB, right?
Right.
For those who weren't in the military, that's a forward operating base, right? So a small, secure area from which we can operate. That's the scale that I intend to operate from as a group. Of course, I work with a bunch of different guys in my organization, and if they think we should go a different way, well, then maybe we go a different way. It's not totally up to me.
Something else is that I had mentioned in the notes that we chose cargo and not fuel because I, I think there's going to be a lot of competition with getting fuel back and forth. A lot of fuel traders. Even whenever I was at CitizenCon last year, um, I got the complex that there was actually a lot of people investing in the Starfarers, and I didn't actually, like yourself, I didn't come across a lot of people who were concerned with moving player assets or moving cargo. So that was kind of a reason why direction that I went. But I'm also looking forward to see your fuel producers. Like when we do see the land claims come online, and you do have static resources that you'll be able to pull up out of the ground. Again, we don't know the timeline on that, but a naval yard or a big fuel depot or something, that alone itself is going to be like a Fort Knox within the game. You're gonna you're going to have a reason to protect assets, whether it be fuel or otherwise, minerals as well. Um, that's something else that we've been looking at, and that we haven't focused very hard for fuel transport, but definitely a naval yard of some sort. Um, it's going to be interesting to see the ground game come online and actually have a reason to stay planet side or protect something or even train planet side when it all comes online.
Right. So my goal is to never be in open warfare with other organizations, right?
Same, same.
The way that Eve works, there's never it's a zero sum game. There's no way to come out on top unless you're the biggest baddest kid in the block. So the way I'd prefer to operate is well, if you need me to go blow somebody's place up, I'll go blow their place up. But they need to understand that I'm not there to defend them unless they pay me to defend them. It's a very mercenary approach to it, but that means that I don't get embroiled in open warfare. You know what I mean? Um, and because of that, that means that our focus again goes back to survival and logistics. So you kind of just touched on it a little bit. In order for there to be things for us to shoot, um, there needs to be a shipyard somewhere making those ships, right? In order for those ships to get repaired, needs to be components for them to be repaired. In order for us to shoot ballistic weapons, we need ammunition and missiles. We need to replace missiles. And if we want to be building big giant bases, there need to be natural resources that we're using to extract and build those bases. All those things mean you need a couple of things. You need to be able to move materials from A to B, and you need to be able to hold areas long enough to build a base, right? Both of those things require huge logistics operations. You're kind of focusing on that, and I've noticed the same thing in the community, right? A lot of people are very focused on I'm going to have my Starfarer out there and I'm going to sell fuel to people and make a boatload of cash selling fuel to people, or I'm going to have my Endeavor out there farming and I'll sell food to people, or whatever, right? But none of them seem to understand that in order to do any of those things, you need to move assets from A to B, and no one's interested in the hard work of moving everyone's fighters from one place to another, or moving
You know,
their ground vehicles from one
or
place to
snub
another.
vehicles for that sense. Maybe somebody chooses that they want to run snubs because they're planet side so much they don't need those quantum drives. Well, those snubs have got to be able to be transported or ferried in some capacity.
Sure, and then that would be especially effective if you're operating out of one planet. You don't really need them to actually quantum jump anywhere. So they've added enough vehicles and enough layers to the game, even with what they have, that it it makes you really think about the future. Because if they really do add in this tiered system where you have anti-aircraft and you have aircraft and you have ground combat and you have ground units who can penetrate complexes, but they die to aircraft if you don't have ground support equipment and aircraft in place, you end up with a very integrated combined arms system where you need to really kind of treat it like you would an actual battle space, which means logistics wins the day is what it
For
comes down
sure,
to.
for sure.
Um, and I'm hitting this point. I've hit it several times during the course of our conversation, but uh, again, I feel like that needs to be the focus of groups that really want to win long term. They need to understand that it doesn't matter if you win a specific engagement in place because your guys are super awesome at space combat. If I damage your ships enough that you can only do that 2 or 3 times, and I can just mow you under because I have better access to resources and repairs, it doesn't matter how good you are at fighting. You still lose.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at some point, the level of support that you can either allocate or that you can plan to maintain, that in some ways is going to outrun skill of an individual engagement. The fact that you have the ability to make a second, third, and fourth engagement typically is what will win a conflict or to defend an area successfully. If they come in and they strike you, or they come in and they disrupt one time, but they can only do it one time, is it really a win?
Well, that's the definition of a Pyrrhic victory, right? So, a Pyrrhic victory. I said it wrong. My mistake. Um, if you win an engagement, but you take such huge damage that you can't win any engagement after that, you've lost. You haven't won. Um, that's why, I mean, personally, our organization, we have as much of a focus on being able to move things effectively and making real plans for how we're going to do that as we do in combat training. We train for combat all the time too, but we have a logistics directorate whose only job is basically to move things around. And the guy we got it is really into doing it, and he's very good at his job. And I think that's one of our biggest assets, in fact, is our ability to get things from A to B, and we can do it in a timely manner because the guy doing it really likes doing it. It matters.
You had mentioned some of the holes that y'all use. We chose the Hercules platform. I confided in with you and Sear and Colt Browning. I confided into several people, and I tried to figure out. I said, our Idris, we're going to treat our Idris as a response hub. Okay, it's not the answer to everything, but it does provide us a staging platform for escort. It provides us for some level of medical play. It also can act as a commodity hub if need be. It does have enough cargo space there that if you needed to unload some Titans or you needed to unload something light, you could compile it into an area and treat it like a small freighter at some point when it did return to port to make profit off of something. It provided a brig, so guys that wanted to do some bounty hunter missions, if you're running a smaller scale bounty hunter, we have a brig that can help you with those operations. Kind of like what you said for a toolbox, we tried to build on the size scale of guys that we had to play for ops, but some of the holes that you chose for logistics side, I know that you say you got some big sticks out there, but what frames are y'all thinking for your logistic runs? Are y'all going more like Caterpillar route, or y'all going a whole series route? What Expand on that for me.
Sure. So we have two basic plans. In my view, what people are going to have to do if they want an end-to-end logistics chain, you need to have a hub system is probably the better way to do this, where you have one primary ship where you're cross-loading all your cargo
Mm-hmm.
to smaller vessels that you can get it onto a planet or to into a gravity well, or harder to get to places with smaller ships. So we have a whole D and a whole E and a whole C that we're going to be using for point to point in space, and we have a Kraken we can use for that as well. That's intended to be our kind of our logistics hub, and then from there we can cross load because the Kraken can hold so much cargo, and we also have a Javelin. We have the ability to cross load over 10,000 SCU in any given place, right? So we'll use our large vessels to cross load massive amounts of cargo, and then we'll use smaller ships, Caterpillar being one of the ones we'll use, um,
As
but
distributors.
as distributors down to the planet, rather than trying to put a ship in a position where it's doing something that it's not very good at, namely going from orbit down to the surface and back up to orbit. Um, we're trying to keep specialized ships doing specialized jobs, but not so many holes in operation that it becomes untenable. You can run that sort of thing with 4 or 5 people on the logistics side. So that's what we're trying to do.
For sure. Yeah, that and the whole series are for sure going to be like you're talking some serious freight getting be able to move there. The main thing that we wanted to we actually have a guy in the group that's wanting to invest in the whole series, but as in for the base bottom line, like you said, 4 or 5 guys doing a daily op or something together. We chose the Hercules because it was the biggest lifting body, vehicle transport. It can more it that we know of so far. It was the best answer for the amount of crew and what we wanted to be able to move. Sadly, it doesn't have the largest capacity of moving cargo, but respectfully enough, I think that, if we had the crew or the resources to field stuff like a Kraken or those, hull D through E's or C's or whatever you said you were running, we definitely would try to do at that level. But as it grows, we're looking at what CR is going to provide us, and I'm interested to see that whole C come online, see the old accordion cargo start happening.
Sure, I think it's scheduled for 3.9 at this point, 3.8. Um, one of those two patches, and when it comes out, I'm super excited to see it. Uh, I don't have anything wrong with the Hercules. I actually own one as well. We opted for the M2, rather than the A2,
Same.
or sorry, which one is it?
The
Which one is the one
M2, so the
that can
M2 and
drop
the
bombs?
C2, yeah. So the A2, that's the bomb dropper, and it carries, I think, one less vehicle, or it's at that point you only have like 200 SCU of cargo or something. You're a
Right. So we
gunship.
have an A2, and the idea here is that it would be there to get into very hard to get into places because it has so much armor and guns and shields, and you can put a tank on it, and it can drop bombs. Um, we're using that for like doing drops and insertions in very, very non-permissive environments, shall we say.
Right.
Um, for permissive environments, we opted for something cheaper to operate that can carry more cargo. In this case, caterpillars, which seem to do most of what we need to do. Starfarers are very good at it too, if you want to do that. And then we can use probably freelancers and stuff of that size. And we actually have several freelancers that we're going to be using for exactly that role. Even the Miss, despite the fact that it has less cargo than the other freelancers, it's a good choice as long as you don't need to move a lot of cargo simply because it's so well armed.
Yeah,
So
we had the same conversation. Me and Colt were trying to decide were the freelancers the answer of what we wanted. You know, you like you said, it could almost defend itself for an expedite shipping. You know, if you needed to get something really quick somewhere, you'd basically be hauling it and defending itself with all those missiles on board.
right. It's all about how much security you need to provide for the cargo that you're currently hauling. And that's ultimately what this all boils down to, right? You need to decide how much you're willing to pay to
For
protect the cargo that
guaranteed
you're
shipping.
shipping.
Yeah.
Right. If it's a load full of hydrogen, it makes no sense at all to be running two Polarises and a Hammerhead and a Javelin for your load of hydrogen, right? It doesn't make any sense at all. It does make a sense if you're moving something that's worth, 500 UEC per SCU or something along those lines.
Right, right. Your risk to delivery reward has to be calculated, and as well as is your return gonna pay for those bills?
Ultimately, it's a business, right? So you look at the bottom line and you provide the security that's appropriate to the amount of risk that's on the table.
Man, I really appreciate it. I know that it's like I said in the future, you guys run ops sometimes, and I've been trying to get more involved with some of our friendlies and other organizations. We've recently started talking to Void Runners. They've got actually an op here in about 20 minutes. But I was really wanting to get you on here. Wanted to get your feedback. You've helped me a whole lot before, and I'm definitely wanting to have some more of these talks with you in the future if you're open to it.
Oh, absolutely. This is great. I enjoyed this conversation. We can talk about whatever topic you want. And yeah, anyone who's listening, if you're interested in talking more to me about doing a more security and PMC look at the Star Citizen universe with a well-run group, let me know. And anyone who's interested in hiring us to do your work, we're here for you. We will work for anyone who wants to pay us.
Well, Artifact, I appreciate it, and I want to thank you for your time, and for the listeners, thank you for choosing to tune into the Badlands Nation Radio podcast. We'll see y'all next episode.